70 days since Nancy Guthrie disappeared, and today Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos stood before television cameras to confirm a reality that continues to fuel intense public scrutiny. Despite possessing security footage recovered directly from Google servers, investigators still do not have an official suspect in custody. The visual data is clear. A masked figure carrying an Ozark Trail backpack was recorded approaching the residence. The forensic evidence is equally undeniable. Blood found on the premises is a confirmed DNA match to the 84-year-old victim. Yet the legal mechanism remains entirely paralyzed. We are observing a scenario where the digital footprint and the physical crime scene intersect perfectly but result in zero accountability. The public is rightfully demanding to know why an alleged perpetrator remains free when their exact movements were documented. The answer lies not in a lack of investigative data, but within the complex procedural calculus of the district attorney. We will examine the precise medical telemetry and the stringent legal constraints currently shielding the intruder. Subscribe to Tracking Evil to follow this ongoing forensic analysis as we dissect the evidence. The frustration surrounding this case stems from a fundamental conflict between federal profilers and local prosecutorial standards. Law enforcement gathers data points to build a working theory of the crime. Prosecutors must secure permanent convictions beyond a reasonable doubt before a jury. When dealing with a missing person where the victim has not been located, the threshold for legal action shifts dramatically. The official silence from the authorities is not necessarily an indicator of incompetence. It is a highly calculated strategic posture regarding the burden of proof. We must separate the emotional outrage from the clinical realities of a forensic investigation. The public demands immediate arrests based on circumstantial surveillance video and corresponding blood evidence. The legal framework requires an airtight narrative to prevent a failed prosecution that could permanently immunize the suspect. This friction creates a procedural void where an alleged kidnapper currently exists without legal consequence. To understand why the judicial system is stalled, we must first establish the undisputed sequence of events leading up to the disappearance. The official timeline begins on the evening of January 31st. At 9:50 in the evening, Tommaso Cioni drove his mother-in-law back to her residence following a family dinner. Surveillance confirms the garage door closed, securing the house for the night. The timeline then jumps forward to the early morning hours of February 1st. At exactly 1:47 in the morning, a masked intruder physically disconnected the exterior doorbell camera. The next confirmed data point occurs near noon the following day. Family members arrived at the residence to conduct a welfare check and immediately dialed 911 after discovering the empty house. Investigators subsequently arrived at the location and identified the blood evidence matching Nancy. That is the official surface timeline presented to the media. It summarizes the basic parameters of the home invasion and the subsequent emergency response from the family. But analyzing a crime solely through police press releases often obscures the underlying mechanics of the event. When we bypass the basic summary and drill directly into the raw digital timeline, a very different behavioral pattern emerges. There is a precise 4-hour chronological gap between the moment the garage door closed and the moment the camera feed was terminated. That specific window of time fundamentally alters the entire psychological profile of this intrusion. The digital record provides an immovable foundation for the subsequent forensic reconstruction. The primary analysis begins precisely at 9:50 in the evening. The garage door mechanism engaged and secured the primary residential perimeter. The family member departed the immediate geographical area. The physical environment transitioned into standard nocturnal isolation. The subsequent timeline presents a profound behavioral anomaly that requires rigorous examination. The suspect did not initiate the physical breach immediately following the departure. The individual established a concealed observation position outside the residential structure. The timeline dictates an absolute waiting period of 237 minutes. This specific duration of static observation fundamentally alters the psychological classification of the perpetrator. Standard property offenders rely on speed and immediate opportunistic action. They systematically test physical barriers and exploit obvious structural vulnerabilities. They rarely remain stationary within a designated target zone for extended durations. The individual monitoring the Guthrie residence demonstrated extreme tactical discipline and restraint. The ambient temperature in the desert environment drops rapidly after the sun sets. The suspect endured these degrading thermal conditions while maintaining visual containment of the target. This calculated delay indicates a highly specific and inflexible operational objective. The suspect required absolute certainty that the target had entered the deepest physiological sleep phase. The surrounding neighborhood activity levels needed to reach a state of absolute zero. The visual evidence recovered from the cloud infrastructure provides critical physical parameters. The suspect measures approximately 5 feet 9 inches in total vertical height. The biomechanical profile indicates a standard or average physical build. The visual data isolates highly specific tactical equipment choices. The suspect utilized a transport pack with a 25-liter internal capacity. The volume of this specific container is highly relevant to the forensic threat assessment. It provides sufficient carrying capacity for intrusion tools and physical restraint mechanisms. The optical sensors also captured the distinct external geometry of a sidearm holster. The confirmed presence of a weapon system reclassifies the entire nature of the event. This was not a standard property crime escalating into spontaneous violence. This was a planned physical subjugation from the absolute moment of inception. The suspect initiated the final approach vector at exactly 1:47 in the morning. The movement pattern was highly calculated and devoid of hesitation. The individual did not explore the exterior perimeter searching for secondary access points. The approach trajectory was a direct and linear path to the primary optical sensor. The suspect utilized the specific visual blind spots inherent in the camera lens angle. This geometric precision indicates the suspect conducted extensive physical reconnaissance prior to the event. The individual knew the exact spatial coordinates of the primary security hardware. The suspect neutralized the recording device with complete mechanical and physical efficiency. The physical connection was abruptly severed. The external optical data stream ceased to exist on the local network. The investigators were suddenly confronted with a total visual blackout of the exterior perimeter. The analytical focus must therefore transition from exterior security hardware to internal medical telemetry. The modern human organism generates continuous digital signatures regardless of physical location. The victim relied upon an internal cardiac pacing system for basic physiological regulation. This specialized medical hardware functions as a continuous biological broadcasting unit. The device monitors the cardiac rhythm of the patient with absolute mathematical precision. It transmits this physiological data to a localized cellular receiving station within the residence. The transmission protocol utilizes a low-energy radio frequency band. The architecture of the system requires continuous physical proximity between the patient and the receiver. The data logs procured directly from the medical provider document a stable transmission sequence. The digital handshake between the implant and the receiver was completely unbroken. The cardiac rhythm remained consistent throughout the initial hours of the morning. The exterior security perimeter was physically breached at 1:47. The interior medical telemetry remained fully active and operational. The biological broadcasting continued for exactly 960 seconds after the visual blackout. The critical forensic inflection point occurred at 2:03 in the morning. The medical data transmission experienced a sudden and catastrophic termination. The internal pacing device abruptly lost all connectivity with the cellular receiving station. A medical implant does not voluntarily power down or enter a dormant state. The digital link is only severed when the physical distance exceeds the maximum transmission range. The data point at 2:03 represents the exact geographical extraction of the victim. The biological entity was physically removed from the local network broadcasting radius. The temporal synchronization of the exterior visual failure and the interior telemetry failure is critical. It forms the absolute core of this entire forensic reconstruction timeline. The digital evidence eliminates any statistical probability of a technical or mechanical coincidence. The data establishes a mathematically precise operational window for the primary event. The perpetrator bypassed the exterior defenses and navigated the interior layout within 16 minutes. The suspect located the target and initiated the physical extraction within this compressed time frame. This operational velocity requires ruthless efficiency and absolute spatial orientation within the structure. The interior environment yielded highly specific biological evidence supporting this violent timeline. Investigators confirmed the presence of blood matching the verified genetic profile of the victim. The physical violence occurred entirely within this 16-minute digital data gap. The Federal Behavioral Analysis Unit possesses this exact chronological sequence of events. The local crime scene technicians possess the confirmed genetic material recovered from the property. The digital tracking data isolates the exact movements and operational speed of the perpetrator. The viewing public assumes this density of evidence will trigger an immediate tactical apprehension. The reality of the criminal justice system operates on a completely divergent logical paradigm. The digital footprint is verified and the biological markers are scientifically absolute. The prosecutorial branch continues to aggressively withhold the authorization for an official arrest warrant. The legal machinery remains completely paralyzed despite the overwhelming matrix of circumstantial data. The authorities are not operating in a state of institutional ignorance or apathy. They are actively navigating a stringent legal doctrine designed to prevent flawed judicial outcomes. This procedural mechanism is currently providing an invisible barrier of protection for the alleged kidnapper. Subscribe to Tracking Evil as we systematically dissect the specific legal framework paralyzing this investigation. We will examine the precise judicial boundaries that are currently keeping a primary suspect out of handcuffs. The perpetrator operated under a fundamental misunderstanding of modern surveillance architecture and digital retention protocols. The physical destruction of the localized optical hardware does not terminate the remote data record. The external camera unit functions essentially as a transient data conduit for visual information. The device processes ambient light and converts the optical input into encrypted data packets. These localized digital packets stream continuously across the residential wireless network without physical storage. The destination is a highly secure remote corporate server farm located thousands of miles away. The physical disconnection of the hardware simply marks the chronological end of the data stream. The preceding visual information remains permanently archived within the automated Google Cloud Storage infrastructure. The suspect erroneously assumed the destruction of the plastic casing eliminated the visual evidence entirely. The Digital Forensics Division easily bypassed this primitive physical countermeasure during the initial investigation phase. The lead investigators submitted formal legal preservation requests to the corporate data custodians immediately. The technology company extracted the encrypted visual files from their back-end data storage arrays. The retrieved visual data provided absolute confirmation of the intrusion timeline and the physical profile. The digital phantom was instantly transformed into a quantifiable physical entity within the investigative matrix. The authorities possess the exact biomechanical dimensions and tactical equipment loadout of the primary intruder. They categorize the specific geometry of the 25-liter transport pack and the sidearm. This digital reconstruction represents only one half of the critical forensic equation required for prosecution. The interior residential environment provided the necessary biological confirmation of extreme physical violence. The crime scene technicians executed a systematic and microscopic grid search of the property. The initial chemical analysis isolated specific biological anomalies on the exterior structural surfaces. The technicians utilized specialized reagents to illuminate cellular degradation patterns invisible to the naked eye. They systematically recovered a distinct fluid sample from the primary staging area near the entrance. The biological material was immediately transferred into a secure chain of custody protocol. The State Forensic Laboratory received the samples to conduct advanced genetic sequencing procedures. These analytical protocols require absolute environmental precision to ensure ultimate legal viability in court. The laboratory technicians extracted the microscopic cellular material and amplified the specific genetic markers. They utilized polymerase chain reaction technology to generate a complete molecular profile of the fluid. The resulting biological sequence was compared directly against the known medical profile of the resident. The victim possessed extensive biological records due to the ongoing cardiac telemetry hardware monitoring. The comparative analytical software yielded an absolute and mathematically certain genetic match almost instantly. The recovered biological material belonged exclusively to the missing 84-year-old female target. The physical evidence effectively eliminates any alternative hypothesis regarding a voluntary departure or medical wandering. The genetic material establishes the indisputable occurrence of a violent physical subjugation at the residence. The forensic profile of the immediate crime scene is now fundamentally complete and scientifically verified. The digital cloud data provides the precise temporal window and the visual identity of the attacker. The localized biological data confirms the physical trauma inflicted upon the specific human target. The analytical intersection of these two distinct datasets creates an overwhelming and objective evidentiary matrix. The general public naturally assumes this density of verified data guarantees immediate judicial action. The physical realities and digital footprints appear completely aligned for a rapid and successful prosecution. The visual documentation exists securely, and the biological confirmation is formally logged into the system. The local law enforcement agency theoretically possesses all necessary components for a comprehensive arrest warrant, yet the physical suspect continues to operate entirely outside the boundaries of judicial control. The critical legal mechanism required to initiate an arrest remains deliberately paralyzed by the authorities. The investigative momentum abruptly collided with an external variable demanding immediate federal cyber intervention. The tactical focus necessarily shifted when a secondary threat vector emerged on the digital horizon. An unknown external entity initiated direct electronic communication with the surviving family members. The transmission contained explicit assertions regarding the physical custody of the missing elderly individual. The digital message outlined highly specific financial demands required to guarantee her safe return. The introduction of interstate extortion fundamentally escalated the jurisdictional authority of the entire investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation immediately assumed primary control of the digital tracking protocols. The Federal Cyber Division initiated a comprehensive forensic analysis of the incoming extortion data packets. The technicians systematically stripped the disguised routing information from the electronic correspondence. The analytical software traced the digital pathway backward through multiple international server relays. The origin node was rapidly isolated to a specific geographical coordinate system utilizing internet registries. The federal response demonstrated the absolute and terrifying efficiency of modern cyber tracking capabilities. The tactical teams executed a physical apprehension within mere days of the initial ransom transmission. The individual, officially identified as Derek Colella, was immediately secured for formal federal interrogation. The subsequent forensic search of his digital hardware revealed a comprehensive matrix of financial fraud. The federal data analysis confirmed Colella possessed absolutely zero physical proximity to the primary crime scene. The entire extortion attempt was a purely opportunistic exploitation of a highly publicized missing person. The perpetrator utilized open-source intelligence gathered from media reports to fabricate the ransom demands. The federal authorities successfully neutralized the secondary threat, but the primary homicide investigation remains stagnant. This rapid federal resolution created a severe public relations crisis for the local county administration. The citizens observed the federal government identify and apprehend a digital suspect almost instantly. They demand to know why the local jurisdiction cannot replicate this operational velocity for murder. The local authorities possess actual video footage and confirmed biological material of the primary attacker. The extortionist utilized only anonymous digital text and was located and captured almost immediately. The extreme contrast in investigative results generated intense external pressure on the local law enforcement leadership. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos absorbed the primary impact of this escalating public frustration. The sheriff conducted formal press briefings to manage the volatile community outrage surrounding the delays. He carefully navigated the aggressive media inquiries regarding the potential identification of the masked intruder. The journalistic representatives specifically demanded confirmation regarding the existence of a primary suspect in custody. The sheriff issued a definitive and legally precise public denial of any impending tactical arrests. He stated clearly that the department does not currently possess a designated primary suspect. This calculated public declaration directly contradicts the apparent density of the gathered forensic evidence. The authorities objectively possess the visual profile and the genetic confirmation of the violent crime. The public inherently interprets this administrative hesitation as a catastrophic failure of local police competence. The reality of the tactical situation involves a much deeper architectural flaw in the legal system. The sheriff and the federal behavioral profilers are not suffering from investigative ignorance or incompetence. They are actively managing a severe tactical disadvantage dictated by stringent prosecutorial constraints. The physical suspect remains free strictly because the legal framework demands a specific threshold of evidence. The entire apprehension operation is currently hostage to a specific legal doctrine concerning missing targets. The valley of tension between the digital evidence and the legal reality is expanding rapidly. The system is preparing to confront the absolute functional limits of circumstantial prosecution. The core of the prosecutorial hesitation resides within a fundamental constitutional protection. The district attorney operates under strict parameters established by the Fifth Amendment regarding judicial jeopardy. The general public views the recovered video and biological material as an absolute guarantee of criminal conviction. Legal professionals evaluate this exact same data matrix through a highly critical framework of reasonable doubt. The current evidentiary profile is constructed entirely upon a foundation of powerful yet inherently circumstantial components. The security hardware captured a masked physical entity but cannot definitively authenticate a specific facial identity. The genetic material confirms a violent event occurred, but the volume does not automatically prove biological termination. The medical telemetry confirms the extraction but does not provide geographical coordinates for the final destination. The most critical component of a successful homicide prosecution remains completely absent from the official inventory. The authorities possess the digital shadow of the crime, but they do not possess the victim. Initiating a formal prosecution in a missing person scenario carries an extreme and permanent tactical risk. The legal doctrine of double jeopardy prevents the state from trying an individual twice for the same offense. If the prosecutor presents the current circumstantial case to a jury and fails to secure a conviction, the result is permanent. The suspect would be granted absolute and irreversible legal immunity regarding the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The authorities could theoretically recover the victim the following day with absolute forensic proof of the perpetrator. The system would be constitutionally prohibited from ever bringing that individual back into a court of law. This permanent legal barrier forces the district attorney into an agonizing strategic holding pattern. They must choose between initiating an immediate but vulnerable prosecution or maintaining temporary public safety risks. The current administrative silence indicates they have elected to preserve their single opportunity for a permanent conviction. The community debate regarding this specific prosecutorial strategy has fractured the public consensus entirely. A significant portion of the population argues the immediate public safety threat supersedes any potential future courtroom vulnerabilities. They believe allowing a biologically confirmed attacker to navigate the community represents an unacceptable institutional failure. The opposing perspective defends the calculated patience required to build an impenetrable prosecutorial narrative. They argue a failed conviction based on premature emotional pressure represents the ultimate miscarriage of justice. Defense attorneys specialize in systematically dismantling circumstantial narratives by introducing alternative statistical probabilities. A skilled defense team could argue the medical implant experienced a catastrophic technical malfunction rather than a geographical extraction. They could suggest the localized biological evidence resulted from a severe medical emergency preceding a voluntary departure. The prosecutor must possess sufficient direct evidence to scientifically obliterate every single alternative hypothesis presented in the courtroom. The district attorney refuses to gamble a permanent homicide conviction on the current density of circumstantial data. This profound philosophical conflict between immediate action and permanent accountability defines the current investigative paralysis. The system is deliberately absorbing immense public damage to protect the integrity of the eventual judicial outcome. The decision to withhold an arrest warrant is not a symptom of an abandoned investigation or bureaucratic apathy. It is a highly specialized defensive maneuver designed to prevent the ultimate legal escape of a lethal predator. We will continue to monitor this complex intersection of digital forensics and constitutional law. Subscribe to Tracking Evil as we maintain relentless focus on the evolving legal strategies within this unprecedented case. The analytical transition must now focus on the physical reality of the active search and recovery operation. The current operational status of the investigation reflects the grueling reality of a major circumstantial case. The initial burst of rapid digital discovery has formally transitioned into a methodical and exhausting physical marathon Local authorities continue to process massive volumes of environmental data, searching for a definitive geographical anomaly. The regional search parameters encompass highly complex desert terrain that actively resists standard recovery methodologies. The passage of time continuously degrades any remaining physical evidence exposed to the harsh external environment. The investigative task force remains fully activated and completely dedicated to resolving the central mystery. The local police department confirms the file remains officially classified as an active and open investigation. Federal behavioral analysis units continue to refine the psychological parameters of the unknown physical intruder. Digital forensics teams are actively attempting to extract secondary geographical data from surrounding cellular towers. Despite these immense collaborative efforts, the primary suspect category remains officially devoid of any confirmed individuals. Law enforcement personnel are actively waiting for a specific catalyst to shatter the current legal stalemate. They require a singular piece of direct physical evidence that transcends the limitations of the circumstantial matrix. The entire trajectory of the criminal justice process hinges upon resolving two massive, outstanding analytical voids. The ultimate resolution requires a definitive answer regarding the current physical location of the victim. The secondary priority involves authenticating the precise biological identity of the individual carrying the Ozark Trail backpack. These two missing data points represent the absolute boundary between a successful prosecution and an unsolved mystery. The tactical reality indicates the perpetrator effectively exploited a recognized vulnerability within the judicial architecture. The individual executed a mathematically precise extraction and successfully navigated the complex legal threshold required for immediate arrest. The community remains entirely suspended in a state of high alert and extreme institutional frustration. Authorities possess the digital ghost of the attacker but lack the physical jurisdiction to neutralize the threat. The public must process the disturbing realization that verified electronic surveillance does not automatically equal immediate legal protection. Biological evidence confirms the violence but cannot unilaterally force the activation of the courtroom machinery. The system remains locked in a high-stakes waiting game, demanding absolute forensic certainty before proceeding. The digital timeline is locked, and the medical data is verified, but the physical narrative remains critically incomplete. The investigation requires a structural breakthrough to cross the rigid threshold established by the district attorney. Law enforcement agencies are systematically cataloging community tips, but the crucial evidentiary link remains undiscovered. The strategic patience of the legal system is currently providing an unintended sanctuary for the perpetrator. The tension between the known digital facts and the unknown physical reality continues to escalate daily. Until that definitive physical link is established, the masked entity from the security footage remains entirely legally untouchable. The vulnerability of the community is an unfortunate but mathematically necessary byproduct of preserving the integrity of the prosecution. The analytical focus remains fixed on the eventual recovery of the required direct evidentiary components. The modern criminal must navigate an invisible architecture of surveillance that extends far beyond physical cameras. Criminals historically prioritize scrubbing physical surfaces with chemical agents to eliminate potential biological transfers. Modern investigations render these physical countermeasures largely irrelevant due to redundant remote data systems. The Guthrie investigation demonstrates the absolute permanence of the digital footprint in contemporary society. A perpetrator can successfully execute a physical intrusion and destroy localized security hardware. They can manipulate the immediate physical environment to delay traditional law enforcement responses. However, they cannot easily neutralize the automated telemetry continuously broadcasting to external cloud infrastructure. The suspect disabled the primary optical sensor but fundamentally failed to understand decentralized data storage. The video packets were already permanently secured within remote server farms before the hardware sustained damage. The Google Cloud servers retained the encrypted visual data without requiring localized physical storage media. The secondary layer of surveillance proved even more resilient to physical interference during the event. The cardiac pacemaker operated entirely independently of the targeted residential broadband networks. It generated a relentless stream of biological data validating the exact timeline of the extraction. This dual layer of technological redundancy essentially guarantees the permanent preservation of a digital crime scene. A perpetrator must possess advanced cyber capabilities to systematically dismantle these interconnected external networks. The individual captured on camera clearly lacked the technical sophistication required for complete digital erasure. They focused entirely on severing the physical wires while remaining ignorant of the background telemetry. The result is a preserved electronic fossil record documenting their precise movements and operational speed. This case illustrates the stark difference between factual intelligence and actual judicial capability. Investigators do not rely solely on visual confirmation or biological evidence in isolation. They synthesize the optical data with the medical telemetry to create a mathematically rigid chronological framework. We possess the precise timeline and the visual profile of the alleged attacker. We possess the confirmed biological material indicating a severe physical confrontation. The mathematical certainty of the digital footprint cannot currently overcome rigid constitutional thresholds. This technological reality shifts the investigative burden from discovering evidence to legally interpreting that evidence. The Guthrie investigation defines the boundary between identifying a suspect and executing a successful prosecution. The constitutional framework forces law enforcement to endure operational paralysis to preserve eventual courtroom viability. The district attorney requires a definitive physical link to eliminate the vulnerability of double jeopardy. The Pima County Sheriff currently navigates an unprecedented level of intense regional and national public scrutiny. The community demands immediate retribution based on the visible optical evidence broadcast across television networks. The administrative leadership must absorb this immense hostility to protect the structural integrity of the trial. Issuing a premature warrant without physical recovery of the target invites catastrophic legal failure in court. Until investigators recover the missing individual or secure a confession, the legal stalemate remains absolute. Our channel functions to bridge the analytical gap between emotional public reactions and clinical forensic realities. We are committed to tracking every forensic development and procedural shift within this active federal investigation. We will systematically analyze any new data releases regarding the recovered genetic material or digital timelines. We will aggressively dissect forthcoming police reports concerning the specific model of the Ozark Trail backpack. The judicial machinery may elect to maintain this strategic holding pattern indefinitely to protect the case. The legal holding pattern provides necessary time to thoroughly evaluate all existing circumstantial data points. We refuse to accept that official silence without rigorously examining the underlying forensic data. What is your analytical hypothesis regarding the precise 16-minute window before the telemetry failure? Provide your detailed assessment of the operational timeline in the comments section below. Historical precedent dictates that collective public scrutiny occasionally identifies variables missed by official behavioral profilers. You are watching Tracking Evil, and we will return when authorities release the next confirmed update.